year, I had the honor of speaking at Liberty University's Convocation. There I spoke to thousands of students about what it takes to be on the front line of pro-life activism, as well as the importance of fighting at the national, state, and local level. For this episode, I thought it'd be fun for you to watch that address that I gave at Liberty. It took me a while to write that speech. There was a little bit of pressure, so I hope you enjoy.
Well, I guess I can't expect any protesters or hecklers today in my speech. So if you follow my social media pages and were expecting me to explain things like you can't be a Christian and pro-choice, or no matter how many times I have sex with my husband, I cannot get pregnant with a koala bear, only a human child. Or say things like, if you think being anti-abortion is hypocritical because there are children in foster care, then you must think the American Cancer Society is heartless because people die of heart disease. Or maybe even snarkily ask you, I'm a clump of cells, why you can't kill me. You all know all of these things, and if you were hoping I would do a little bit of that, I guess you'd be a little disappointed. But I don't know what else to tell you besides maybe you shouldn't come to a school like Liberty. You should go somewhere that teaches things like feminism through Taylor Swift songs instead of biology and philosophy. Instead, men and women, I've come here to deliver a different type of message with you here today. I want to use our time together to tell you about a problem we face in the pro-life movement and how you are the solution. I remember June 21st, 2022. I was sitting down at a tiny 5-gate airport in Idaho Falls. I just had lunch with my family, and I positioned myself right by the bathroom and the good electrical plug that works. And I was getting ready to head to Houston, drive to Louisiana, do a couple of speeches, and then eventually make my way to Washington, D.C. for what we thought would be a Monday Supreme Court decision, the day we would finally hear the fate of Roe versus Wade. Our team had it all planned out. We had hundreds of students on standby, speaker systems, rally signs, all of that jazz. But then I got a call from my best friend and our executive president, Students for Life, who shouted as soon as I picked up the phone, "It's happening tomorrow, get here." I can't tell you how we knew, but we knew it was credible. Then began the panic and the rush. I had mere hours to get to Washington, D.C., and I was 30 hours away by car in a very small airport that doesn't have flights coming in every other hour. Of course, there was no flights for me from Idaho, so I got a rental car and drove to the biggest city I could find, called a poor team member who booked 5 different flights, all to the East Coast, to get me as close as possible to Washington. And of course, if you may not remember, this is when there was a pilot shortage because of the COVID pandemic, so flights were being canceled. Obviously, God was not going to make this task an easy one for me. I got to the airport for the first time in my life. I did not put gas in the rental car. I just dropped that sucker off, still paying off those charges. Ran into the terminal, thought I've got time to spare. I will even get to eat because I passed out the In-N-Out burger on the way, which is something I never do. And there was a huge line in the terminal because, of course, there was also a TSA shortage at the same time. After some finagling, maybe a little bit of begging, I got up to the front of the line, ran into my gate, was the last person on the plane, on the red eye, with the most expensive seat I've ever booked on an airplane. I got to Baltimore at 6 a.m., a few hours early, on the morning of June 22nd, hopped into an Uber, called a friend who had a bathroom that I can change into, not a shower, and was at the court by 8:30. And it happened. Unlike normal days when Students for Life rallies the pro-life generation to Supreme Court, where we're there for press conferences and prayer vigils, the efforts of the day were very much unplanned. Despite being up all night because of the adrenaline rush to get on that plane, I failed to write a speech. I had no idea what we were going to do. I don't remember what I said that day. I simply remember being at the podium, chanting, hey, hey, ho, ho, Roe v. Wade is going to go, having the abortion protesters next to us scream and shout at us and tell everybody how I wasn't a real woman. And then Tina, who had called me and started this mass panic, handed me her phone and said, read. Without knowing what it would say, I started shouting into the mic, the Constitution does not confer a right to abortion. Roe and Casey are overruled. Being at the Supreme Court and announcing that decision, I don't know if it's going to work. I have a picture for you. Did you see a picture? No? Nope, back. There you go. Being at the Supreme Court that day, announcing that decision, watching Roe being thrown onto the ash heap of history, like Dred Scott and Plessy v. Ferguson, that was a humbling honor. It's a moment that I'll never forget, minus the staggering credit card debt from all the flights and the rental car gas that my husband never knew about. But it was relatively easy. It was easy compared to now what must come next. When I think about the day, the difficulties I had of getting to the court, the panic struggle to find the flights, the post-pandemic pilot and TSA shortage, thank you, Dr. Fauci, driving hours, not sleeping, not showering, that was a hard one for me. The unwritten remarks, being without so many of my peers and the students that we had coming in to join us on Monday. All of those difficulties have become a bit of a metaphor for me for the pro-life movement today. The rushing around to respond and fight back against the social media lies, the campus culture, the misinformation we're constantly fed from the abortion lobby and their fear-mongering. Having to go in things alone sometimes. Going into states like Oklahoma to see them pass a Life at Conception Act, ending all abortions, in which I had half pro-life folks against it because I was asking the legislature to do something too hard, and others mad that I wasn't forcing women to go to jail. We did it though. We passed that law. We're going to do it in South Carolina. Going in alone right now, Kentucky in the news. Republican legislators have introduced a law to amend their pro-life law that doesn't allow any abortions to allow some abortions simply because they were conceived like my friend Ryan. Going in and having to fight that alone. Innovating as we go, as culture and politics demand it. Ballot referendums. I didn't know how to fight a ballot referendum until about a year and a half ago. Learning as we go, making things up. In the 2 years since that day, I've heard mixed and contrasting messages about where our movement really stands. I've heard the pro-life movement is no longer needed since Roe is gone. I have heard that our movement was unprepared and divided for what comes next. I have heard that our culture has gone too far in building that Tower of Babel, that it will never come back. I have heard now, recently, that abortion is merely just a state's issue. Is the mission of abolishing abortion achieved? Heck no. Is abortion only a state's issue? Wrong. A trivial state line does not determine our human rights. Were many in our movement unprepared for the end of Roe? Some, not all, and it's time to move on from that complaint. Is the pro-life movement at times divided on strategies? Yes. But it's not the bad thing you're always led to believe. I'm going to explain that shortly. Is our culture confused, hurting, searching for happiness, turning further and further away from God? Perhaps. But even though sometimes we have to journey alone, that we don't have it all figured out, perfectly planned, that we don't always know what's going to be in store next or what's going to be on the cell phone when you start reading, or even sometimes when we disagree with tactics or strategy, our mission is absolutely winnable if you join me? Before I tell you more what you can do, I want to expand upon some of the claims that we often see. In the last 2.5 years, many brick and mortar abortion facilities have closed their doors. And yes, many states have acted with courage to end the abortion violence. But even in the red states, chemical abortion pills now flow to rapists and human traffickers, to women with life-threatening pre-existing conditions that they don't know about, and are now proven, are flowing known endocrine disruptors into our drinking water because tons of human remains, chemically tainted human remains, are going into our wastewater systems. Thank you, President Biden. Thus, the number of abortions in America is still about the same because of the proliferation of chemical abortion pills. Even if you live in a red state, it is still legal to send chemical abortion pills into that state. And Planned Parenthood, the nation's largest abortion vendor, is still receiving more than $700 million of our taxpayer dollars. From 1993 to 2022, they killed more than 7.5 million children with over 11 million of our taxpayer dollars. Ending this project needs to be like number one on Elon Musk's Doge task list, by the way. So, is this the best we can do? Are we done? Our nation is surrounded by the abortion industry. Do we give up? Do we escape? Ignore the death of millions of children and the walking wounded in our nation and go invest our time and talent and treasure into another human rights cause that might help us make more friends instead of losing them? Do we simply defend our city that's under siege, going to President Trump and asking him for the bare minimum, like the release of the pro-life prayer warriors that are in federal prison right now, like the reinstatement of the Mexico City policy that will stop our federal tax dollars from funding abortions overseas? Or do we do the harder thing? Do we attack? Do you conquer our fears of failure, of ridicule, and we fight and trust in Him to bring us the victory? It's hard. I know. Don't forget, I'm on campuses much different than this normally, having conversation with the most lost, confused, broken people in our culture. And it's not just the non-believers who struggle. At the Supreme Court that day, you may not know this, but there weren't any other national pro-life groups we were with. I had emailed my friends, please come to the court. I can't tell you why. I'm on my way. Be there at 8:30. I saw a friend at the court, and I begged her, please stay with us. I need you at the podium. We don't know what's going to happen, but the pro-life movement's got to be there, showing the world we'll never stop until abortion's gone. And she left. She didn't stay for the decision. We proclaim to serve an almighty God who spoke the universe into existence. But for some reason, when it comes to ending abortion in America, I hear over and over again from Christians, from pro-lifers, that it can't be done. Or that it can only be done using one specific piece of legislation or tactic. And if it isn't done that way, it'll never work. Men and women, we must reject the lies that Satan whispers to us, the lies that spark fears, the sins of disbelief that instill a harmful, deadly sin of pride into us. Y'all, it's true. Our Jericho, Roe v. Wade, has fallen. But that was just the first step in our conquest of the promised land. It's not complete. This is why it's going to be up to us, the pro-life generation, those of us constantly targeted by the predatory abortion industry, to lead the pro-life revolution, to achieve the goals of our grandmothers and pro-life foremothers, to finally abolish abortion, making it illegal and unthinkable in our land. And getting there will specifically require you. Now, let me be real with you. There is no playbook for how to do this. But I believe there are playbooks from our past that are gathering dust on our library shelves across America. For the story of how women won the right to vote and the suffrage movement shows us a viable path forward. The women's rights suffrage movement had a lot of early successes in Wyoming, Colorado, and Idaho. But yet they faced numerous setbacks over this multi-decade battle. Many of the setbacks were external: the Civil War, the financial panic of the 1890s, World War I, millennia of women being treated as second-class objects. There were other things they faced that were internal, mostly disagreements over personalities and strategies and timelines. When it became clear that America was going to enter World War I, a fight broke out within the suffrage movement. Be a good, patriotic American, lay down the cause for the fight to the right to vote, join President Wilson even though he had promised to support suffrage but had betrayed them, or continue to be the annoying women in the room arguing for suffrage. And there were different camps. Carrie Catt led a very powerful, well-established organization, was in Washington, D.C., was friends with all the senators and congressmen and even President Wilson. She had more of a catch flies with honey type of approach. Alice Paul was a little younger, and she was a little dissuaded by politics. She founded the National Women's Party, and she said, you know what, we need to use direct confrontation. We need to force Americans to see, think, and talk about the injustice. We need to call out every leader, even those who once were friendly, to the cause to ensure we finally get this job done. As you all may remember from history, or if you ever watched that movie, Iron-Jawed Angels, it didn't seem like a success for Alice. Alice Paul and her friends ended up in the Occoquan, Virginia workhouse on a hunger strike, being violently force-fed for weeks because of their political protests in front of the White House, calling President Wilson Kaiser Wilson. This was during World War I. Germany were not our friends. This was a really big deal. Carrie Catt, who was mad at Alice Paul for doing this and begged her not to do it, then had to go to the White House to beg President Wilson to save Alice's life and free her. While these two women, Carrie and Alice, emerged as sort of the final leaders of the women's suffrage movement, they were not friends, and their strategies didn't often align. Direct confrontation versus catch flies with more honey. That's a recipe for a little bit of a fight. But today's historians will all say the same thing. It worked. They complemented each other. They needed each other. And the grassroots suffrage movement finally saw the victory that Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton had started decades before. Together, Kat and Alice had brought new ideas, youthful leadership, a willingness to persist, incremental victories that snowballed until public opinion and legislators knew they had no choice but to get on board. This is why I need you to join me in this fight. Because the victory they saw wasn't from some singular thing they did or this one particular tactic or strategy. It was a summation of dozens over decades by thousands. So I don't care if sometime you disagree with tactics that I may deploy. Apparently not everyone gets giddy when I tell Planned Parenthood to go fund themselves. Sorry, I think it's hilarious. You may not like that, that's okay. Or if you only maybe say, I don't want to serve in politics, I only want to serve at the local level. I want to fight to end the demand, not the supply of abortion. Okay. Or maybe you have a brand new idea of something I've never thought of that's going to be way better than anything I've ever done that's going to make a difference. Also okay. Today, on this anniversary of the most horrific scene in our American story, the handing down of Roe v. Wade and Doe versus Bolton, that is singularly responsible for the slaughter of over 50 million preborn baby girls and baby boys, which continues today in the name of reproductive justice and rights. I just need you to commit to joining the pro-life revolution. No matter what your skill set is, no matter what your fear may be, your personal background, I don't care. Social movements throughout our collective American history have all been different. But let me tell you guys, one thing remains the same with all of them. The victor must have the largest, most well-trained, and most activated army. And in this army of love that's marching towards a promised land where every child is welcomed in life and protected by law, where every woman who's facing an unplanned crisis pregnancy knows she has love and support. Everyone has a job in this campaign. Much like the day at the Supreme Court, I had staff running to every CVS on Capitol Hill, getting water to help our students fight heat exhaustion. I literally had a staffer in charge of bathrooms. Do you know how hard it is to find a clean bathroom on Capitol Hill? It's the basement of the National Archives, by the way. Where were we going to park? I had staff working with the Supreme Court police so they wouldn't shut down our protests, staff talking to the media, bodyguards who were protecting us from the 60-year-old women who were trying to hit my head with the top of their protest sign. True story. Me standing at the podium and just chanting as loud as I possibly could. We all had a job. And by the way, I should clarify, I keep using the word social movement. I don't think of what we're trying to achieve as simply a social movement. It's defending the sanctity and the intrinsic value of human life from conception to natural death is a spiritual mandate. How do I know this? Because in the Lord's Prayer, we are asked to pray that God's will be done on earth as it is in heaven. We are his army, citizens of heaven first, whose mandate is to bring heaven's values to earth. And the most important value we have is the fact that we are all image bearers of God, starting at conception. Summary, this means all of us are required. No excuses. Yet, as St. John Newman said, while we all share in one mission, it is also uniquely our own. And there's plenty of generational battles and cities we must conquer on our way to the promised land that you can decide how you want to participate and join us in. We must take and hold ground at every high school and college campus in our country because you know that's who they target. We must position the pro-life generation and pro-life champions in every state house and on Capitol Hill who will serve him, advance the pro-life movement, not just worry about the advancement of their political party. We must kick Planned Parenthood out of every school, especially our Christian campuses. We must ensure President Trump's new administration finishes the job and finally tells Planned Parenthood to go fund themselves. He'll like that. He's all about that. We must ensure every college has a public pathway of success for a pregnant and scared young woman where she will know where she can go for support, hope, and love. And make sure every woman in America facing that unplanned crisis pregnancy knows that we care about her more, that we have the places she can go. For our research tells us nearly 75% of our neighbors do not know about pregnancy resource centers. We must revive community pro-life grassroots activism by praying in front of the abortion facilities of 40 Days for Life, by sidewalk counseling, by going door to door, doing the thing our generation hates the most, having face-to-face conversations, and telling our neighbors about the violence of abortion and the non-violent health care available in their communities. We have to stop the proliferation of chemical abortion pills that aren't just in the blue states. They're in all the states. We must use innovative tactics like the Clean Water Act to convince Americans, pro-life and pro-choice, that killing babies and then flushing them down the toilet so our drinking water literally has endocrine disruptor metabolites in it from these dead children is no bueno. We must advance laws that protect women and families and encourage them to choose life. Do you know, even when you poll pro-choice Gen Z and Gen Y voters, when you say, if a woman has all the resources she needs, help, support, scholarships, paid leave, would you support a politician who would vote against abortion? Yes. It becomes a 70% issue. So men and women of liberty, it's time for you to assume your leadership of the pro-life revolution, to ask God to give you wisdom and courage and fortitude so we can see God's will done on earth as it is in heaven. And I'll be with you every step of the way. I started Students for Life at 21. I'm used to people naysaying me and saying, you're crazy, Kristan, that'll never happen. When you fail, let me know and I can help you get a job. I know what it's like to walk into a room and say, I think you're all doing this wrong. I have a staff of people who tell me that all the time. It's very good. You don't have to know every pithy answer to everything. KISS, keep it simple, stupid. Anytime someone asks you a question about defending your abortion beliefs, your radical pro-life beliefs, all you need to know is the main thing. Every single direct intentional abortion ends the life of a unique human being created in the image of God who's intrinsically valuable just like you and I because we were made in his image. If what's inside of her is a meaningless blob of tissue, then it's like having your tooth removed. There's no justification needed for abortion. But if what's inside of her, or what's created at the Petri dish in the IVF clinic is a unique, unrepeatable human being made in his image, there's no justification you can give to justify the violent ending of their life just because they're inconvenient to someone. Friends, you are the modern Davids in this fight against the abortion Goliath, working tirelessly as we're outspent by hundreds of millions of dollars, fighting back against constant lies and fear-mongering, and a Hollywood and influencer elite that's seemingly against us. You're the ones helping us pressure and hold responsible political leaders who say they're with us in private but fail to act with us in public. You're the modern Davids. Now, I know David didn't have a slingshot like that. It was more like a shepherd's slingshot, but ChatGPT could not figure it out, by the way. I fought with ChatGPT for like 30 minutes for that. To get started, to determine how and when you will join this campaign for the Promised Land, follow these steps. Believe in an almighty God who spoke the universe into existence, and through him victory will come. Use the spiritual gifts you've been given to find your niche, your calling. Conquer your fear of failure. Don't worry about messing up sometimes. You will. It's okay. Get over it. Accept that you will be facing off against a well-funded Goliath, an opponent that's much bigger, has much more money than you. Accept the challenge of the underdog. Do what David did and go on the offense and attack. And oh, by the way, do what David did. Be innovative. Lay down the sword and the shield and the traditional weapons of the day and grab a slingshot. Just like the David we all grew up hearing in Sunday school, the nobody. Remember, this is before he was king. The young man, the shepherd who lacked battle experience, the confidence of his peers wasn't there. Be the David who rushes into battle against the Goliath. who innovates the attack in a new way, who never wavers in their belief in the great I am. Be the Davids he made you to be. And your weapon might be different than that. You can't end abortion with that slingshot. And your weapon of ending abortion may not be having a bullhorn or going to college campuses and having people yell at you. I accept that. But your weapon, I have no doubt, will be even more deadly to the abortion Goliath. You just have to figure out what your gifts, your passion, and the privilege he's given you are to engage this battle. And you're not going to be alone. The pro-life generation is now on more than 1,500 campuses. We've been honored to train more than 225,000 young people, and we are motivated to reach our goal, bringing God's will to earth as it is in heaven, with the largest, most well-trained, most activated army of any social movement in our history. And we're not just fighting back, we're going on the offensive, innovating, getting involved. And we're going to work together until we reach that promised land of no abortion in America. A land where every mother and every young couple knows that there's hope and support and love for them. A land where every abortion facility and vendor which preys and profits off of fear and desperation is closed forever. A land where every child created in our Maker's image is welcomed in life and protected by law. So I beg of you today, friends, don't allow your uncertainty, your fear of failure, or what you may perceive to be disorganization or disagreements over tactics and strategies. Don't let any of that get in the way of your task and use it as an excuse for inaction. We're all citizens of heaven with a very clear mandate. We serve a God who breaks down the walls, who defeats the giants, who spoke our universe into existence. So be a David. Rush into the battle, innovate proudly, and most importantly, trust in him that the promised land is near, and believe that the pro-life revolution is 100% possible. Thank you.
Thank you for watching this special episode of the Kristan Hawkins Show. And I hope you learned a little something from my speech at Liberty University's Convocation and took away some encouragement too about how we must be David in this fight to take on and end the abortion Goliath. If you can, take a minute to like, subscribe, and leave me a comment on this video about a pro-life topic you would like to see me address in the future where I can go into a deeper dive. And as always, you can join my personal text line where you're going to get a news item or action item from me Monday through Friday that I have found interesting that I want to share with you by texting my name, Kristan, to the number 53445. Until next week, keep speaking for life and standing for the most voiceless and defenseless among us, the preborn.